Welcome to Pharma Insights Unplugged, a platform where we engage with thought leaders shaping the future of healthcare, medical affairs, and clinical research. I'm your host, Dr. Amit Dang, and through this series, we aim to explore the evolving landscape of pharmaceuticals, digital health, and evidence based decision making, bringing valuable insights to professionals across the industry. Today, we are delighted to welcome Dr. Stephanie Ambrose, a seasoned medical affairs leader with extensive experience across oncology, infectious diseases, and maternal and pediatric health. Currently, the country medical director at GSK, she is deeply involved in compliance, ethics, and patient centric innovation. Passionate about STEM education and gender diversity, she brings a unique perspective on balancing scientific excellence, strategy, and healthcare transformation. So, good morning, Dr. Stephanie. How are you doing today? And welcome to Pharma Insights Unplugged.
No, very well. And thank you, Amit, for the opportunity. I do a lot of talks outside. I love chairing events, but I've never actually done a podcast. So this is my first, and thank you for the invitation.
Great. And this is actually the first woman leader podcast with us.
Oh,
So, it's
thank
for the very
you.
first.
Thanks, Amit.
Great. So, Dr. Stephanie, your journey from clinical practice to leadership in medical affairs has been remarkable. What key decisions or experiences shaped your transition into the pharmaceutical industry?
So thanks for that question, Amit. And before I start, just quick disclosure as well. Whatever I'm sharing today is very much, my experience throughout my career, and it's not linked to, my appointment at GSK. So just wanted to do a quick one. But, to your question, I just want to say first that, I grew up in a household where my mom, she was a matron, a nurse for about 35 years. And, she's been retired for the last 2 decades now. But, just growing up in a household where she would come back, she would tell me stories about patient care. And mom was very genuine in the work that she was doing. And I can tell you, she would tell me stories about her grooming in terms of patients when they don't have caregivers. She will go down and basically cut their toenails. That's how mom was. So that was a big inspiration for me in terms of healthcare and giving back to patients. But also, it's something where, I confidently talk about now, but I was diagnosed with vitiligo, a chronic skin condition when I was just 10
Yeah.
years old. And at that time for me was, I was looking into how can I, find a cure for vitiligo? How can I find a cure for this and that illnesses? So that kind of drove me and that passion to trying out being a medical doctor, which I did. I graduated from Ireland, was a medical doctor, practiced for a couple of years. But after that, I had the opportunity, met some friends who were in the industry, the pharma industry, got to know a little bit about medical affairs. But one of the things I had in mind, I always have a plan B. So I was like, let me try, going into medical affairs. If it doesn't work out, I can always bounce back, go back to clinical practice. So that was probably close to 15 years now. So I'm still
Okay.
here. Enjoyed every bit of my journey in medical affairs.
Got it.
And I just love the whole combination where, you have the passion for science, but you also have the
Right.
business, the corporate side. So yeah, I mean, that drove me and why I'm here today in medical affairs.
Thank you so much for sharing your candid opinion. I can somewhere relate to it because even I wanted to try my hands on the whole entrepreneurial journey. And I was like, okay, let me just take it up. Otherwise, I have a plan B to go back and join as a medical affairs personnel in the pharma space. It was exactly 14 or 15 years back. So plan B is always good to have.
Always good to have, and you never know your destination, right? It's always good
True.
to try. Yeah.
True. So, Dr. Stephanie, like as the country medical director at GSK, what are some of the most significant challenges you have faced in leading medical affairs and how do you navigate them?
No, that's a very good question. I think firstly for me, I'm very passionate about leading a team, and being country medical director or head of medical affairs. I want to say close to about 10 years now because it was since 2015. And I have to say, Amit, in terms of medical affairs, trying to get the seat at the table. And I felt that one of my biggest challenge over the last decade, and I see that as an opportunity as well, because if you don't go through challenges, you never learn, you never grow, right?
True.
And for me, because I've always seen medical affairs as being a valued partner, and for me, when we are valued partners and we have seat at the table, that would mean we're in there with our commercial counterparts, with our counterparts in terms of having discussions together, making decisions together as partners. But at the same time, I do feel it's good to reflect in terms of why we started off as support function, because I started off as a support function. There was a lot of behind the scenes. We do all this, right? We review, we approve materials. There's a lot of, in terms of doing bread and butter that we do, which is continuous medical education in hospitals and
Right.
so, but not necessarily taking the full front of being a medical business partner. But this is where, for me and my team, and of course, for me, I know I'm confident and I can have those conversations. But when you have a team with you, you need to bring them along this journey as well and making sure that they are as equally confident as you are. And for me, we need to pivot. We need to switch in terms of how we were operating to be more strategic in what we
Right.
do, to be more into driving innovation, right? Being innovative. But at the same time, when it comes to trusted partners, and probably, Amit, you've heard this from other industry medical leaders as well. Why is it so hard for medical to showcase KPIs, like our impact, right?
I was about to
Has
say that.
always been a dialogue. And
Yeah,
truthfully, the work that we do does take time, right? When you talk about
absolutely.
clinical trials, it take about a couple of years before we see that data output, the impact. When we talk about us changing, clinical practice with guidelines and recommendation and consensus, it takes several years. Nothing happens overnight. But then
Right.
equally well, I think it's important for medical affairs to sit and listen to understand from commercial, what are the most short-term impacts that we can bring. And so, I mean, we've come a long way. I mean, what used to be a challenge, I feel now we talk proudly about. So yeah, that's one challenge. I'm sure there's a list of
Yeah.
challenges.
No, there are a couple of things that you mentioned are absolutely in line with what I always think about medical affairs. First thing you mentioned about value partners. This is something, very interesting. And I guess all the stakeholders now have started realizing that, yes, they do bring so much of value in so many things. And second thing, talking about KPIs, certainly, like I just recently attended one of the conferences of MAPS in New Orleans, and there were so many sessions on defining the KPIs, and certainly there are lots. It's just that we need to be perhaps agile enough, or there has to be certain SOPs wherein they can kind of fix the KPIs. But yes, certainly there are many, and the frameworks are getting established, the platforms are getting created. It's all about putting up the right data, and we can have the KPIs on the dashboard. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. And if there's one thing I want in terms of your viewers, Amit, to know that you need to believe that you are the nucleus, like medical affairs, I strongly believe is the nucleus in the company. We
Right.
work with our R&D partners, our colleagues, but then we also have our commercial partners. And I see
Exactly.
end to end and throughout the whole life cycle. So I truly believe that we're co-equal partners.
So your involvement in the Singapore Association of Pharmaceutical Industries Ethics and Business Integrity Committee highlights your commitment to compliance and governance. How do you balance innovation and regulatory frameworks in the pharma industry?
I think that's a very good question. We talk about this, of course, especially when you're in a pharma side, it's a very regulated environment. And I think first and foremost, what I always get my team to do and our commercial counterpart is to really recognize and respect that we are in a regulated environment. But why? Because ultimately it's for the patients, right? We want to make sure they have the right care, the appropriate care, and equally as well in terms of all our interactions and partnerships. But one of the things I like to say is I'm a big fan of people coming with innovative ideas, big ideas, putting it on the table, and we start talking about it. But my ask and my only ask for teams, including medical affairs, is have we thought about the risk, right? Because you can quantify the risk in terms of being low, medium, high risk. And if it's low and medium, let's think about mitigations. Let's think about monitoring that we can put in place to make sure that it's a safe project that we are pushing out and lending that impact. But of course, if it's going to be high risk, I mean, it's something for us to think twice. Is that the path that you want to take? If you have strong justification, sure. But high risk means high likelihood or maybe breaching something, right? A policy, an SOP, or maybe patient care, etc. But the second part to this, for me to address this question, Amit, is around medical affairs and this understanding from all industry partners throughout throughout my journey is medical policing the work of commercial. You probably have heard of this, and I can tell you, I'm sure medics do not like this label, and I do not believe medical affairs are, policing commercial, but rather, how are we as business partners in terms of ensuring we're there to guide, to support commercial when they have their projects. But from medical affairs, my only message to everyone has always been, if you're going to say no to something, what are other alternatives or solutions are you providing your, counterpart? And I think that's so important. Now, the third
Yeah.
one may or may not agree with me, but I always believe that if you are the project owner and you're responsible for a certain initiative, then the responsibility and accountability should be on yourself. People working around you, maybe medical, it could be compliance, it could be legal. We're all here to
Right.
support you. But that's my belief. And again, when you're in a very regulated environment, we should ask ourselves why. Why is that so? And ultimately, again, is protecting our teams, protecting our company, and the patients as well.
You said it very rightly. If we are being confident about taking ownership of anything,
Yeah.
where we are deciding something, then we just need to take it up. Then we can't really expect that we can put up a blame on somebody else, because it's eventually a collective effort. But then, if medical affairs has taken a lead, then they need to own it as well.
No, absolutely. Thanks. Thanks, Amit.
Right. So, having led medical affairs in diverse therapeutic areas such as oncology, maternal and pediatric health, ophthalmology, how do you adapt your strategic approach across different specialties?
That's a very good question. I think if anyone has seen my profile, know I've been across many different portfolios, and not only that, Amit, I've done FMCG with Nestle, local roles, country, region, cluster roles as well, but at the same time diversified my portfolio. And the reason why I wanted to do that, and it was very intentional, was so that I can get to understand the different portfolios, therapeutic area, learn and lift and shift from one another. So, it gets better
Excellent.
and better. And that's how I see it. But I can tell you it's not a one size fits all. So if
Yeah.
you're going to work and engage with GPs, it's very different from when you would engage with hematologists, oncologists, medical oncologists, very different engagement. And we need to tailor accordingly. So if I can give an example and how I, lead my team is when we're going into a therapeutic area, first and foremost, we really need to get to know the key opinion leaders in that space, the key experts in that space. We're now taken a step further to looking at personas. And I think our industry partners are doing that as well. You really need to tailor according to the preference of the different personas, right? Your data packaging and so on. But the second piece is around the patients as well. Do we take time to, understand patient profile, patient journey? And that's important. At the same time, the complexities in the different therapeutic areas as well. And once we've done that, we can better understand the approach that we're going to take. I've worked in the preventive space at the same time, the treatment space. In the preventive space, it's so important for us to educate the public, to empower the public, pour out the health literacy, get them to actually speak to their healthcare professionals. So we empower them, right? But then if you look at the oncology, hematology side, is very much a space where the trust that the patient has, the utmost trust on their physicians, because it's a life and death situation, is life threatening when it comes to cancer. So then the approach that we need to take from medical affairs is how do we get important data to help the physician make the right decision? And in the oncology space, we work with physicians, we send them on preceptorships, train the trainer. You've got all kinds of
Yeah.
educational events and congresses, ASCO, ESMO, and so on. At the same time, the hard data. So physicians in this specialty space, they like to see not just the clinical trials, but real world evidences, safety data. So how are we packaging all this data? And that's how we tailor approach our engagement and conversations with the different specialty.
No, this is to the point. I mean, certainly when it comes to the specialty disease areas like oncology, it's an ever evolving science. Every day we get to see so many publications. It's very difficult for anybody to keep an update or get himself updated in real time. So as much as we can update them, nothing like it.
Now, well said. And it requires a certain skill as well for medical in this space.
True. So, Dr. Stephanie, you have been an advocate for STEM education and gender diversity in leadership. So, what challenges do women face in medical affairs and life sciences, and how can we foster a more inclusive environment?
Oh, thanks for that. It's one of my favorite topics. You
Favorite.
probably see me
Yeah.
smile more when it comes to topics about women and inclusivity, right? So I think not just medical affairs, but definitely science as a whole and the whole STEM space. Amit, I had the privilege of working with really strong women leaders here in Asia, and we actually launched a book last year. So we released a book, and I had written a chapter in this book around the STEM space where I call out in terms of the gaps, the stats. I called out solutions as well. And one of the things we always talk about women and their careers when they are already in their journey of starting a job or already in their careers. But actually for me, I'm super passionate about let's take a step back because it starts from childhood, and I strongly believe in terms of how we cultivating that environment for young girls and boys as well, because I have two boys and I talk to them
Okay.
about this as well. They're 8 and 11 years old. It's how we're cultivating the interest, the exposure, the opportunities that, girls can have. And, if I go into the topic of allies, we always talk about men as allies, which I'm a huge fan. My husband is a huge ally of mine, but we don't often talk about parents and teachers as allies because it really stems from the school days, right? And I did a workshop last year with fun oddly enough, it was CEOs of a lot of companies, and we were talking about how do we cultivate this in the younger days. And we looked at stats whereby just simple things. If a household could only afford one laptop or one computer, want to take a wild guess where the computer or the location is?
Perhaps in the husband's room?
In the boys room.
Yeah.
So if you have a son and
Boys.
daughter, it's going to be in the
Okay.
boys room.
I got it.
But the question is, why isn't it in the common room,
Yeah.
right? If you look
Yeah.
at the internet, I mean, there's a wealth of knowledge and access there, right? So we want everyone to have equal opportunity. So that's something that, I talk a lot about. Start at the younger days, not necessarily at the career point, but of course, we continue to talk about this. But for me, Amit, in terms of when going back to medical affairs and the workspace, if I have an individual in front of me and I'm interviewing, or if I have someone in my team that I'm promoting, being inclusive is making sure we don't look at gender. We're looking at the capabilities and the potential that the individual
Right.
has. And from
Right.
there, how do I put you in the right role, right? Because I want you to be successful. I don't want you to
Yeah.
fail.
Yeah.
So that to me is being inclusive. So I hope I answered that question because I think
No,
honestly,
absolutely.
you can talk to me for hours on this topic.
There is something to learn about, and that reminds me that I have one daughter and one son. Subconsciously, we tend to create a disparity between a boy and a girl, and we need to avoid that. So,
Correct.
I guess this is the take home message that I'm personally taking.
No,
From this
thank you.
particular question. Yeah. So now with your experience in infectious diseases and immunization, what are your key takeaways from the recent global health crisis, and how should the industry be better prepared for future pandemics?
To be honest, that's a very deep question, a very heavy topic. So I think for me, it really stems from getting the opportunity to experience when I was with Pfizer, when I was with GSK. I had the opportunity to partner with BioMarrow, and I did a write-up on antimicrobial resistance and stewardship. And I have to say, one of the things, pharma plays such an important role in this space, right? It's not just about the research and development that we're working on, but it's very important. It's the alliance and the partnership. So how are we partnering with, say, CDC, so Center of Disease Control, WHO, World Health Organization, but equally as well, in different countries, you have your CDC equivalent, or infectious steering committees and Ministry of Health and so on, and regulators, right? Because you can't do it alone. And same thing with the agencies as well. They need to partner with the pharma side. So once we establish that partnership, one of the important things I learned about obviously COVID-19 and how we're preparing and having this preparedness is, have we done our pathogen surveillance? It's time that pathogen surveillance needs to happen in most of the countries because demographics, regions are different. You have different pathogens. They all evolve very quickly as
Yeah.
well. How do we come together as a community to know and learn what sort of antimicrobials, so antibiotics, antivirals, vaccines are we now researching and developing? And that's so important. And the dialogue continues, right? The other thing that we don't talk a lot about is the whole delivery infrastructure. Having developed the vaccines or, antimicrobials is one thing, but what about the whole end to end, right? And we're talking about supply chain, we're talking about supply resistance until a
Right.
patient gets the care. And at the same time as well is what's that goal we're striving for? I believe everyone has this goal, and that's equitable access. How are we protecting the more vulnerable population? So this is something that, I learned in my journey of being in the infectious diseases space.
I still remembered and the days of pandemic. It was a total chaotic situation and nobody could be blamed. I mean, everyone was on toes to make things happen right. I mean, there was quite a havoc in India, but the government took right decisions. And you talked about the equity. So they were very efficient to, get the things supplied to the grassroots level, create their own vaccine. But yes, this is something which needs to be really taken care of as a proactive measure.
Absolutely. A lot of learnings from COVID-19. I do believe we're better prepared.
So, going on to the next question, patient centricity has become a buzzword in healthcare. So, how do you ensure that medical affairs strategies are aligned with the real world patient needs?
That's a very important question. I mean, it's everything that we do in the pharma side within medical affairs, right? So I think it's absolutely important for us to understand patient needs, unmet needs, right? And one of the things that I do with my team is, are we truly walking in the patient's shoes? That's the first question. The second thing is, are we taking a holistic view and approach, right? Because often than not, we always look at the physical side of things in terms of the illness, the condition, but we don't necessarily look into other areas like emotional well-being, mental well-being, social well-being, societal view of a certain condition. The second part is really about who is in that circle of care, because often that not as medics, we're always geared to just speaking to physicians. I think bread and butter for us automatically when we have a product or new medicine coming through, we say, let's do an ad board. And I think ad board is just one item, but we need to look into that circle of care of getting the patient's voices, the caregiver voices. What about the patient group, right? There's so many places where we can get information to bring us closer to better understanding, patient needs. But also the last piece I have, which I've been doing quite a bit over the years, is social listening. I mean, we're now in the digital era, right? So we should do our social listening, but do it appropriately, of course. We're not taking
Right.
sensitive information. We're just going in, listening to conversations around disease, conversations around management, but also in terms of, when we talk and design clinical studies and surveys, are we also looking into the aspect of patient-reported outcomes and
Yeah,
patient-reported
Rose.
experiences? And I think
Right.
those, everything that I mentioned will bring us closer to really better understanding the patient and so that we can do what's right for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially PROs are now becoming a regular part of all the clinical trials. And that is very important because eventually they need to understand how the patients are really feeling at the end of the day. It's not just about rectifying their lab parameters, but eventually giving them that.
That's it.
So digital health and AI, and they are transforming pharmaceutical R&D as well as medical affairs. So how do you see these technologies shaping the future of healthcare, and what excites you the most about this particular evolution?
I feel like you're asking me all my favorite topics. It actually recently did a write up on LinkedIn as well, talking about AI, talking about the digital transformation within medical affairs. I think firstly, it's a new paradigm. It's moving really fast. We're all excited. It's promising. But I think the question to also ask is how are we adapting to the growing integration within medical affairs, right? And also how are we recognizing that the transformative potential in this space? And one thing I started off this journey with my team is getting them to a mindset to believe that, this is the next for medical affairs and how do we integrate? And all these advancements, I mean, you talk about AI, so artificial intelligence, the subset of, generative AI and so on. So I think those are very critical because, we are able to facilitate the work that we're doing, to accelerate the work that we're doing, and in terms of how we generate data, how we analyze insights, how we generate content today. I think that's for me, it's so exciting because if you look at the work that AI is doing and how fast it can pull, patterns and
True.
hypotheses, conclusions, it's just a blink of an eye. Of course, it makes a lot of my a lot easier, but at the same time,
Right.
we want those data out quickly because there's a lot of things that we need to do externally to really bring about that patient care, right, with the data that we have. But at the same time, there's a lot of hype in talking about everything great about these
Yeah.
technologies, but we also need to be mindful in how reliable is it. And I think this needs
Right.
to come into the discussion as we, move on to our next step and, the next phase.
Absolutely. I mean, there has to be an ethical element to all the AI tools that we have started using it. And certainly, governments also need to figure out or come up with the right framework so that they can be used within the purview of this particular ethical framework.
No, absolutely. And I always feel that we come up with project initiatives a lot faster than we're coming up with the policies around this, but it's about time we move in tandem with each other.
So now, last couple of more questions. Balancing a high impact career with personal well-being is always challenging. So, what is your philosophy on work-life balance, and how do you stay motivated and resilient?
Like I said, you're touching on all my favorite topics. So I'm personally someone who really believes in a healthy equilibrium in terms of how you balance personal life, your private life, your professional life, right? And as I mentioned, I'm a mom of two boys. They're 8 and 11. They need me probably more than ever. And my husband and I, for us, our commitment and our responsibility is towards our family, right? Same time, of course, we have our professional lives as well.
Right.
Firstly, it's not easy. I want to
I
disclose that,
know.
right? It's not easy. I think we can say that, let's just go in and have conversations around work-life balance, right? It takes time to build a culture, how you build eat and breathe culture about respecting everyone's boundaries. And for me, for example, with my team and even my leadership team, we practice if it's after working hours, if it's weekends, if someone's going on a holiday, disconnect. We tell that person, you have the responsibility. It's on you to disconnect. And of course, for us as well, we feel really hard. Like for me, going on a holiday, I'm leaving my team behind, and you think like, what's going to happen, right? But of course, the trust is there. You know that they'll be okay. And probably they're happy staff is taking, a little break and away. But it's all about how you communicate, I feel, in terms of even when I'm leaving, right? I'm going to make sure there's a point of contact in place. Or if something is burning, staff is reachable, contactable. I'm not just disappearing. At the same time, the responsibility to make sure there's business continuity plans in place. And when we do that, we start seeing that shift. And one of the other things, Amit, I just also recently did a write-up on LinkedIn is about how we're focusing on things that matters, prioritizing on things that matters, because very quickly, I think our plate will start spilling, right? We love taking on projects and initiatives. We don't know how to say no. And that can really disrupt that work-life balance. So how are we doing things and taking on priorities that will make that impact, but at the same time, what you don't want to do when you take on 10 things is to deliver suboptimally, and that's not what we want.
Yeah, you rightly said, easier said than done. I have two toddlers, so I know how difficult it can be. We actually take them to international conferences, put them in daycare, and then we both are trying to do business development activity for the company. So it's quite a hustle. So
Yes.
that's how we kind of try to strike a balance so that, they are traveling with us, but at the same time, they are also having a comfort of a daycare or an exposure to an international kindergarten school or something like that. But yes, easier said than done. It's an art and it comes gradually, no doubt about it.
It is, but at least you're taking them with you, which is a bonus.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
right. So that brings us to the last question for today. So, finally, if you had one piece of advice for aspiring medical affairs professionals looking to make an impact, what would it be?
I think for me, one of the things that I love doing, Amit, is I love going to universities, talking to students, yeah, PhD medical students who are looking to explore the medical side of things in pharma, but at the same time as well, those who are doing their internship and those who are newly onboarding, right? So I think first and foremost, it's more of an observation. A lot of the conversations I have, I hear people only thinking that if you want to get into medical, you just have to have a scientific background and scientific foundation and full stop. So I like to go in and explain a little bit more because the world of medical has changed tremendously. It's transformed over the past decade and you require a lot of other essential skills. So for example, let's take business acumen. We talk about medical having business acumen, but what does that mean, right? And for me, it's firstly to be curious about what commercial is doing, curious about commercialization, etc. And then you build your business side of things. Two, we need to have analytical skills because a lot of the work that medical is involved in is around data, right? And we have to be data driven because that will inform our next decision making and so on. The next thing is around communication because a lot of times medical people are quite the introverts. And I don't know whether you will agree with me, but largely I want to say 50-50 because I've come across a lot of different medical people, but communication is so, so key. And when we talk
True.
about communication, it's not just about listening, it's how are we interacting, how are we speaking,
Got it.
etc. You need that confidence, right? And you need to sometimes go all out depending on your stakeholders. And internally, we're working with so many stakeholders, right? From
Right.
commercial and all the other functions. But if you take externally, the landscape of the ecosystem has changed. It's no longer just with healthcare professionals. You've got societies and organizations,
Absolutely.
patient group, patients that you're talking to. So you need to up that communication
Yeah.
skills.
There.
So if you put all of this together, I think my message is we need to go beyond the science. There's a lot of other essential skills that we need to equip ourselves. The journey for me, where to getting here, it took me a while to build confidence, speaking to people, networking, learning, shadowing, and then slowly now start role modeling myself. But I want, your viewers to know that the field of medical affairs is so fun. We've got science, we've got business, we've got the corporate side of things. So I cannot imagine being anywhere but here. Yeah.
Certainly, I mean, the soft skills and the art of communication is very important, especially when you have to go and meet the government professionals, you have
Yes.
to go and meet the payers, not just only doctors, as you mentioned. So, Dr. Ambrose, thank you for sharing your incredible journey and thoughtful reflections with us today, from navigating the complexities of medical affairs to championing the ethical leadership, patient centricity, and inclusion. Your story certainly truly inspiring, and your commitment to advancing healthcare through innovation, resilience, and purpose driven leadership serves as a powerful example for professionals across the industry. And it's been a privilege having you on Pharma Insights Unplugged today.
No, thank you. I mean, it's a huge pleasure. So thank you for having me. And all I can say is wish you all the best for all your other podcasts to come. And I look forward to
Thank you.
listening to them as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.